Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night to those of you who are streaming this event, depending on what time it is in your respective countries. It is an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be here today representing the Real Madrid University School, the European University, and it is an honor for me to introduce you to four of the finest sports lawyers in the world. These are people I regard as friends as well. I have to be honest, their academic prowess is well known. I'm only here to introduce them to you, really. I will shortly be passing the baton to them, and they will be taking the floor now. I know you know Jesus is quite well known to you. He's got 4 decades experience in sports law. Yes, it's 45 years. Congratulations on that. So he's very, very experienced, perhaps the most experienced on today's panel, and he's going to be doing a much better job than me of moderating it. Then we have José Lasa. Aside from being an absolutely incredible sports lawyer, he's a great athlete. He was a professional basketball player. This is your home, José. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I don't know if you still play basketball, actually, but he does work as a lawyer at one of the main law firms in the country, Laffer. Then we have Mr. Crespo, who is leading an ever-growing team. They had to move out of their old offices into the new headquarters because the company has grown so much over the years. And then following on, we've got Lucas Ferrer. I'm very excited to be introducing him to you because he's almost like a brother to me. We are peers. We've shared so many experiences, and I always take great pride in working with him and introducing him at conferences and congresses. He worked as a counselor at TAS. We've often crossed paths traveling to and from Barcelona and the United States. This is your home as well, sir, and thank you so much for being here today. And then, finally, it is also a privilege for me to introduce you to Javier Ferrero, someone I look up to. When I took my, first steps in sports law, he was a major reference for me, as he headed one of the largest sports law firms in the world, Carriles. He was a leader in the practice for so many years in sports entertainment. He headed an incredible team there, but eventually he moved on to another very important law firm, Senn Ferrero. And once again, it is a privilege for me to be able to share my time and the stage with you. This is your home as well. You worked as a legal advisor for Real Madrid for a spell. You actually put together the department here. And the archive we've got here are still very, very good. You created them yourself. So an incredible lineup today, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is shaping up to be a very special evening. I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I'm sure I will. It is a privilege to have such incredible experts here with us. Without further ado, I'll give them the floor now. Feel free to interact with them, ask them questions. You'll see that they are incredible professionals, incredible people, highly motivated. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. I have no doubts you will find this very, very interesting. And for those of you who are streaming this event online, please feel free to send us your questions as well. Good evening, everyone. I have no water here. Hope I won't get thirsty. I'm very, very friendly with these people. A lot of them are former athletes. The only one who isn't is, well, yours truly. I feel slightly out of place. Mind you, this is important. All of this talk is going to be in Spanish, all right? So if you don't speak Spanish, feel free to use our simultaneous interpretation service. This is going to be a very hands-on session. We thought we would divide up today's panel into three blocks. You can ask us your questions at the end of each block. So don't be shy. Come forward with your questions at the end of each block. Now, the first question I'd like to put to you, because aside from being lawyers, we're all human beings as well. We may not look it, but we are. The first question I want to put to you is very, very simple. And you could perhaps answer in this order, from left to right, as you're sat on the stage. So the first question is, how old are you? I'm 51. 46 in a week. And you, Lucas? I'm 55. Okay, so we represent different generations. Okay, so that was the first question. The second question is we each represent a different law firm, two from Madrid, one from Valencia, one from Barcelona. We mostly work in the football industry, but also in other sports. We're all Spaniards. All of us are Spaniards. We need to be proud of that, because sports law here in Spain is very, very highly regarded. It was Spain was one of the first countries to teach it as a BA. So if you wanted to train as a lawyer, you could specialize as a sports lawyer here in Spain already a long time ago, which means we have a long-standing history in this field. So I've asked you how old you are. How long have you worked as sports lawyers? How long have you been able to make a living as a sports lawyer? Well, for me, 15, 20 years, more or less. I had a bit of a weird experience, really, a bit of an atypical career, because I was a basketball player once, but yeah, 15, 20 years as a sports lawyer. Right, so the very moment I took up law, I started studying law, I immediately took an interest to sports law. Luckily, a family member was a sports lawyer himself. Nowadays, of course, sports law is highly regarded, because generation upon generation here in Spain, we've come up at different universities with different courses, different master's program. But when I graduated my BA in 2005, there was, I think, only one master's program in Lleida, near Barcelona, and that was it. And by the way, I was interested in international sports law, and there was nothing of the sort, so I couldn't do a master's. What I did in the end was, well, go on a work placement working at a law firm here in Spain for about a year, and I did know that I wanted to be a sports lawyer eventually, but when I worked there, they made me do civil law, trade law, and international arbitrations initially, and then only over time did I switch to sports law. It wasn't until I started working at TAS, the TMT, that I truly began to practice as a sports lawyer. Right, I'm gonna be very, very specific, because I became a sports lawyer on July the 1st, 1999. I remember the date because, well, I never thought I would become a sports lawyer, to be honest, but I was working at the Garriles law firm, and someone one day came up to me and said, starting tomorrow, and it was the 1st of July, you'll be working for Real Madrid. And obviously I said yes. I actually got married shortly thereafter. But yeah, so it was a bit unexpected for me. And then I started working for Real Madrid, and one of the first lawyers I met was Juan. Yes, I remember that. It was quite funny, that, wasn't it? Because I was with Raúl Martín and Jorge Valdano, and we 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 were having a bit of an argument. We weren't exactly getting along at the time, but Javier came up to me because we knew each other already, but you came up to me in the corridor. So we greeted one another, and then Valdano asked me, do you know him? And I said, yes, of course, I do. And it was at that point that Valdano was able to sort of relax, and we made up. We stopped fighting. It was great. So that was the day a friendship was born, thanks to you. I wanted to ask you a question. How long have you been wearing bow ties? Well, I have a picture as a 10-year-old wearing a black bow tie. Now, 62 years down the line, I still wear a bow tie. What about sports law yourself? When did you start practicing sports law? Thank you for the question. I know he likes talking, so I thought I'd put the question to him. Right, one day in 1993, 1994, perhaps, I thought I'd buy myself a bow tie. So I got the bow tie, I got a vest and a pocket watch. But then the outfit as a whole was a bit too much, so I took the bow tie off. But yeah, the other day, at a shareholders meeting for Sevilla FC, some people actually made fun of me because of the bow tie. They called me bow tie man. If you look it up, if on YouTube, if you look up Juan de Dios's fight at Sevilla FC's board meeting, you'll see it. Right. So anyway, I think it's important to be a lawyer first and foremost, and then only later to specialize in sports law. You need to know the law as a whole before you can specialize in sports law. In the case of Lucas, he came from a family firm. I was an expert in trade law. That's where I started off. And that sort of lays down the groundwork for you to later specialize in sports law. So I never studied a master's in sports law. I cut my teeth by practicing the trade. I don't know if you agree with that. Well, I do agree with that. A lot of people actually keep saying to me, even nowadays, that sports law doesn't really exist. No, that's inaccurate. But what that means, I suppose, is that first and foremost, you need to be a lawyer. And then, only then can you specialize in sports law, because if you don't know what the law is all about as a whole, you're never going to be a good lawyer. It doesn't matter whether you want to specialize in sports law or, I don't know, pharmaceuticals, what have you. You need to know the law as a whole. You need to know how it works. And only then can you specialize in something specific. What do you think? Yes, I absolutely agree, of course. This is an ongoing debate, actually. Sports law is, let's say, just a niche bit of the field of law. It's true, but if you go through a copyright contract implemented in in sports, it's just a run-of-the-mill contract. So it is true that you need to cut your teeth as a general practitioner, as a general lawyer, practitioner of the law. And then later on you can specialize in sports law. If you want to be a lawyer, you need to be curious. You need to want to learn. No holds barred. That's what you need to do. And you've got to put in the work. It's hours upon hours of work to lay down the groundwork and later specialize in whatever you like best. So once again, you need the foundations, you need to study, and you need to be curious. You need to study lots, hours upon hours. There's no shortcuts in this sector. In my experience, it all boils down to hard work and commitment. I fully agree. I agree with Jose. We always say that sports law in and of itself doesn't quite exist, does it? We are lawyers who work for a specific industry. And this profession is practiced by people who are passionate about sports and passionate about the law. And it is a world to be passionate about because it kind of differs from other sectors of the law. This is a job, for example, that will take you all over the world. It's got an international vocation, and by practicing it, you get to experience several different areas of the law, contract drafting and so much more, what have you. So I'm very passionate about it, and Lucas was saying earlier that, especially at first, well, early on, a few years back, there weren't that many of us sports lawyers. There were agents, but that was pretty much it. And then over time, our profession, as we know it nowadays, developed. Please don't think we're telling you that sports law doesn't exist. It does exist. It does exist, of course, but it's still got a lot of room for growth. Okay, that's my takeaway message for this. Yeah, it is true that for a long time people haven't quite seemed to believe that sports law even existed. I founded a sports law department at a law firm that I worked at a while back. And after I did that, a colleague came up to me and said, when are we going to organize an in-house tennis tournament? And I said, what? Oh, you're in charge of the sports department, aren't you? I said, yes, sports law. I don't organize tournaments. So there was a lot of confusion back in the day. Some people look down on us saying, no, he's not a real lawyer. He only works with footballers. Some people still look down on us, but obviously that's wrong. Javier, I think, put it very, very well earlier. It is just great to wake up in the morning knowing that you'll get to talk to some people at a conference, or or that you're going to get to handle a court case for FIFA, stuff like that. It's absolutely great. A lot of people, for example, specialize in marriage law or mortgage law. And I don't see them waking up in the morning saying, oh, it's so exciting. I'm going to help two people get a divorce today, or I'm going to get a mortgage for this guy. I just don't see it. Whereas everything we do here in sports law is always something new. It feels like a game. It's exciting. It makes you happy. I'm so happy when I practice my profession. And this is something that not a lot of people can say around the world. Maybe actors can, but not many others. And what you said about waking up happy in the morning, it is true that we get to travel a lot and we've got lots of tight deadlines. My next question is, do we have a 9 to 5 or don't we? Yeah, I think that doesn't exist in our profession. Number one, because sports law has an eminently international vocation. That's one of the reasons. And then when you work for a law firm, well, you've got your work, of course, but many other things to care for. And also because sometimes you need to be at the beck and call of your clients. We don't always feel like we own our time, okay? It is very, very important to at least attempt to carve out a few hours every day to be with your family or to rest up. But this feels like a 24/7 profession. Yeah, so if you're interested in sports law, forget about a 9 to 5 schedule. Because sometimes you'll have deadlines or clients in Australia or in the US who work different hours, meaning that you have to wake up early or go to bed very late. Yes, and I think I agree with that. Sometimes we have to organize conference calls on a Friday for participants from the US, Mexico, and Australia. How difficult is that? Considering the time difference. It's true, it's a reality, it's just how it works. Sports law is a quintessentially international discipline, and this means that you have to make yourself available to your clients. You need to, I think you need to understand it right off the bat. It's very important. Your clients need you, and you need to be there for them. You need to offer them the best possible service that you can. Now, new generations, and this is something that we have seen over time, don't seem to always look kindly upon this. Okay, they don't like it too much, but it is something you need to understand because it's very important. Some things are never going to change, and you need to understand them if you want to work in this field, if you want to grow as professionals in sports law, especially in certain specific areas of our profession. If you want to do that, you need to know that you need to devote a lot of your personal time to this profession. If you want a 9 to 5 job, that doesn't exist in sports law, basically. Maybe later on in your career, you will be able actually to work flexible hours, but at first, not really. Javier, what do you think? I don't mean to put you off the profession. It's just the reality of things. Yes, I think I agree. Let me tell you an anecdote. It doesn't have much to do with sports. It's got to do with entertainment. But just to give you an idea, we have a client who is a singer.
Y entonces yo, sinceramente, que ya empezaba a tratar con él, no sabía bien de su vida, bien.
There is a Netflix show about this singer, 3 seasons, which I watched to familiarize myself with his work. And that's basically all I did for a few days. I just binged this series to the point that my wife one day said to me, "Okay, I'll see you next season." She gave up on me. Just to give you an idea, these things happen in our profession. It's just how things work. Nowadays, this is how it works. You need to show dedication to your clients. And by the way, I should say that new technologies have made it a lot more difficult because you can't afford, for example, not to answer a text message. The first thing you do in the morning when you get up is check your WhatsApp. Sometimes I do that and I see, that I got a text message at 2 in the morning asking, "Are you awake?" Well, of course I wasn't awake because at 2 in the morning people are supposed to sleep, but that's the reality of the job. Right, just to tell you something interestingly, I don't have WhatsApp. You can live without it. Aside from WhatsApp, if people want to get in touch, they can call you, they can send you an email, they can send you an SMS. I don't have WhatsApp. My wife sometimes will tell me, Maria didn't get back to me, what have you. I never worry about that because I don't have WhatsApp. I don't think I could live without WhatsApp. Says Jose. No, I can. I'm sorry. It's absolutely doable. I don't see the difference. All I need is a suit and a phone. That's it. Yeah, but sometimes your clients will send you messages on WhatsApp. You know, you've got disappearing messages on WhatsApp. Sometimes they'll send me disappearing messages because they want to. And you don't have that option with SMSs, disappearing messages. Like, look, I think technology is something we need collectively to tame. I have zero interest in WhatsApp. Emails serve the exact same purpose. Just sorry to pile on what I'm saying. I think Lucas and I are slightly younger than the others. But I think it's important for you to know what you're dealing with. Yeah. People expect you to get back to them, clients expect you to get back to them 1 second after they've contacted you on WhatsApp or via email. You need to know what sort of world you're set to step into. They expect you to get back to them after 1 second, and if you do send them an email, they will get back to you after 1 second. It doesn't matter where you are, where you're sending the email from, on a plane, at the office, wherever you are, they will get back to you after 1 second, expecting that you reciprocate. Literally, you send them an email, a message, 1 minute later, you have your response. This is the sort of world you're stepping into. Some of the people on this panel actually were innovators for this sector here in Spain. They shaped it the way it is nowadays. And this means, unfortunately, that if you want to practice this profession at a certain level, they have set the bar really, really high. That's why, you know, you're from a younger generation than us, although a couple of people are perhaps a little bit older than the average in the audience. This is my message for you. Technology is great, it really helps, but the most important thing in this profession is taking proper care of your clients. Yesterday, it was my birthday actually, and a client came up to me, an agent who represents the new Messi, a 13-year-old who plays for Barcelona, and he wanted a contract. He wanted help to draft this 13-year-old's contract with Barcelona. It was my birthday, but I had to do it. It was my birthday. You know, chances are they'll sign this contract a bit later down the line, but I have to do my job. I don't have a choice. Sometimes this is equally important. Sometimes they'll ask you questions that are quite difficult to answer, and in that case, you can, you know, take some time to yourself to look it up and study up, and only get back to them later. But again, my takeaway message here is that this is no 9-to-5 job. It's 24/7.
Sí, por supuesto, ahora mismo. El tío se fue muy contento y dice, ¿ahora mismo dónde? Dice, no, a la puerta, ahora mismo puede usted viajar. Fue muy duro, pero es que no puedes venir a un despacho a decir cuándo voy a viajar con usted, ¿no?
A client came up to me the other day, shortly before I hopped on a plane because I had to leave, and he was so impatient that he wanted to get on the plane with me. Obviously, I had to tell him no, but this is the sort of clients we have to work with. Fortunately, I should also say that nowadays we've got law firms which specialize in this. It didn't exist back in the day, now it exists, and your colleagues can help you. I'm going to move on to the next question now. You have to take proper care of your clients, but because this is an international sort of field, sometimes you have to take into account, for example, your client's culture. You just mentioned the Netflix show, but what I was thinking about, for example, you need to know when Ramadan or yesterday Bayram
la región musulmana, en Turquía específicamente se llama Bayram. El Eid se llama en nuestro sitio, pero Bayram hay. Y yo sé que no
finished
pueden
in
durar
Turkey.
Bayram, porque están de vacaciones, de fiesta.
Because it's a bank holiday in Turkey, I know that I can't try and contact my clients because they're on holiday. You need to know that, for example. Yesterday I got an email from a client in Turkey. He said, look, Baram is over, we can talk now. So aside from being able to speak multiple languages as a sports lawyer, you need to be able to, you need to know your clients, to know their culture, because it's not the same to talk to a Chinese person as it is to talk to someone from Qatar, Mexico, Argentina. I work a lot with Argentina. It's not the same. You need to be able to tell a Montevideo accent apart from a Buenos Aires accent.
Or to a Peruvian, that pisco is Chilean. No, pisco is from Peru no matter what. And when I'm in Chile, I say it's from Chile. You have to be with people that are in favor of the mainstream. That's the main thing about a lawyer. You have to be a bit actor and liar. The question I was saying just now about knowledge, it was about knowing languages. How important you think, because we talked that we are international lawyers, all of us, how important you think it's not from 1 to 10, but really important in your daily world language. How important languages are. Let's start over there. Every time I talk about it with people, I believe it's key. I also believe that, truth to be told, right now, people pay more attention to languages as well. If you ask me, according to experience with English and Spanish, it's good enough because it's true that in the office, in the law firm, we have people who speak in Italian, French, German, and other guys speak Chinese. But it's true that maybe that's not so much used. Maybe some people believe Chinese is a bit more important. But I think it's key, especially in the sector we're in, because of what we were talking about before. We're in a global world in that sense, and these rules, and even more in this sector, so it's something that is relevant. I believe it's quite relevant. I agree. As a matter of fact, if I talk about my own case, that's the difference. One of the doors were open because of that, because I spoke proper English, Italian, and some French. And after my French improved when I was in Switzerland, but it was a differentiating factor, and that would open a door. Nowadays, the reality, and we're saying that the world is changing. I remember that before, to translate a contract, you have to start writing it up or send it to a translation. And nowadays, with artificial intelligence, that's automatic. And it's also true that nowadays you start having simultaneous translators where you talk and it's translated while you are talking. So the world is changing in a direction, but I still believe, and I refuse to believe, that you can communicate with someone in a language that you master in a direct way. Will always be better when someone's translated or a machine is translated. And we talk about it when we're in trials, when we have an audience in task, for instance, official languages are English, French, and Spanish. And it was quite frequent that people will go with a translator. Do you remember that? Because they could not express themselves in English, the procedure was in English, and they would have a translator. Even if the translator does a good job, because sometimes they were good jobs, but what you lose or when the message is transmitted is really big. So it's obviously a lot better to be able to express yourself in these languages. Like I said, nowadays, if you speak English and Spanish, it's a lot better. And if you add this, it's even better. I totally agree, but I also pile up on what you were saying before about understanding and knowing the culture. When I lived in different countries, what people really appreciate is that you try somehow to be integrated in a country, to learn the language. And I think that happens a lot. And it has happened with customers a few days ago with a customer with a complex language and so on, being in Saudi Arabia. There was great recognition by the people, by the authorities, just because he tried to speak Arab before a lot of people in the meeting when he knew how difficult that was. And that helps a lot in the moment of the integration, and as Javier was saying about needs and so on. So it's really difficult when you have someone on a table, and quite often these are really brilliant lawyers, and the lack of speaking a language punishes them and penalizes when you say this guy is brilliant, but he's not been able to be heard because he cannot speak. Yeah, to transmit a language, any language that is not your own, there's a moment that communicating there is complicated. And as Jose was saying, and Lucas was saying, sometimes you miss opportunities. It happened in our law firm that some specific guy speaks amazing English because since he was living in England, and I say that he speaks even better than British. So sometimes when you're going to prepare a hearing, you tend to say you're going to do this because it's like this guy is really good. So this is a competitive advantage. And you try to need and dominate this. The Arab thing, it's interesting because when I was appointed in the month of November, the chairman of the International Association of Football, we had a congress in Riyadh, and our official languages are English, Spanish, and French, but I memorized 2 or 3 sentences in Arab, and people were really happy because I made the effort of understanding that. So I had a question here, and I'm going to talk about languages, but then I'm going to ask about artificial intelligence. It was here, but you already included it. You scored a goal to me. So it's true that right now, 3 languages. I'm not saying that everyone has it, but it's easy to find 3 or 4 languages. In my time, I spoke 4 languages, and nobody spoke that, so that's a differentiating factor. The more languages you speak, then different languages, even better. So you have something. It's from my personal point of view. My grandson, 15 years old, I speak to him in French. My wife speaks to him in Spanish. His father in English, and his mother in Chinese. Yeah, so the kid is going to kill himself. He will not speak until he's 15 years old, but then he'll be wonderful. My daughter speaks 4 languages. My son 7, and when you can give people this start to you and your children, don't be afraid of going and learning. There's a student who's now in my office who has 20 hours a week of Spanish to be able to stay in Spain because he wants to be a sports lawyer in Spain. You already have Spanish, but you can say German, Italian, or any other language. Now, I have a question here that was not in the agenda, on my mental agenda, but that happened to me not so long ago. I had to provide a class on artificial intelligence in sports. I have no idea how to study a lot. Translation, obviously, translations, but honestly, I don't trust AI translation. I had a contract and I had to retranslate it because sports law is specific. There are things that are not the same in one language than the next, and AI makes a mistake. So artificial intelligence in translation, in preparing lawsuits, and what's the future in sports or sports law? So it's a lot. Let's start here. I think this is too wide. The problem with artificial intelligence, and I say that not just in law, but in general, how necessary are men, how in a law firm there's going to be a big part with the person, the man is going to be really important, but in a big part of the law firm, theoretically, with the implementation of artificial intelligence, and I tell that a lot to our interns, that you evolve really fast if you give functionality to your work, Or this is the problem we're going to have. Silly example, when we set up the law firm 15 years ago, the first thing I asked to a computer friend is if I could have a Siri, a law. And the guy really laughed. And he said, okay, how many are you in the office? I said, 4. Okay, you don't have time to train this tool. And I'm not a guru, and I don't find anyone. But 15 years ago, as I had such a scarce human resources, and I thought I needed a tool to help me, just imagine now. So if we were talking about competition, the competition for younger people is that older people are going to have a lot of resources to reach a lot of places. So the problem is how that translates. If there's the legal profession, what we're going to cross, what we're going to get. But it's true that element that is going to trigger knowledge, both of apprehension and terms of dissemination of knowledge. I think is really dangerous, but really attractive, which could be really fruitful. Okay. I think, and piling up on what Juan de Dios was saying about translations, there are programs that perform translation of 150 pages in a few seconds. So we agree that this technology is still evolving, and nowadays it's like you will not remember, but the ones who are here lived this experience. When we saw 30 years ago, people carrying a phone, and they were like amazed with a suitcase and a phone, and this was the first cell phone, and this was really quickly, and now everyone has a computer in our pocket that does everything, and that's the evolution technology had in this period of time. And now we are at the beginning of artificial intelligence. We are with the guy in the suitcase and the Motorola speaking, and this is the beginning. For you, and I'm saying this because this is a debate we have in the law firm, and we see it from 2 different perspectives, as José was saying. As a law firm, you have to face this because it's a reality. Nowadays, artificial intelligence, it's right here, it's part of our everyday. And if you open WhatsApp, there's artificial intelligence. Jurisprudence searchers already have AI. There's AI especially developed for law firms, so it's a reality. How does this affect you? It affects you directly. First, because you're AI users, and second, because next to you is sitting an competitors, because it's part of that. But as you say, you have to set a difference, and this is twofold. On the one side, artificial intelligence, it's also an obstacle for you to become the best version of a lawyer you can be, because it's really easy to write and to get an answer and to save time. We didn't have this. You have to go there. You have to study jurisprudence by reading it, by reviewing decisions in books. In other times, we do volumes. Also my time. Yeah, that was less for me. But yeah, I remember the first databases with a computer that was. But nowadays, searchers develop with AI. You have different works with universities. Raise up if you use AI to do something that you needed to do for the university. Nearly everyone, I'm sure, if you're not raising your hand, you probably use it as a support, and that's the way it has to be. The thing is how you do it, how you use that. If it's a tool that will allow you to improve, that will allow you to fine-tune, to go beyond, I think it's fine, and it's useful. The thing is when it becomes on what it is, I just get whatever it is, and that's good for you. And yeah, that's not good because that's against you. And as Jose said, if we can find jurisprudence, we can say, okay, let's find this and that. But then why should I have an intern if AI does? So you need to contribute with your differentiating point. And that's a difficult challenge that you have in this generation. And we have to manage that. And where does that lead us? And I'll finish with this. I have no idea. But for sure, it will affect in the future of this profession. Javier, the last thing you said that you have no fucking idea. Well, my artificial intelligence knew that you were going to say that. So from what he said, is the lawyer going to be replaced? No. I totally agree with what you were saying, of course. And one of the things that maybe, and I saw that with my children as well, that I'm really happy that I lived in a time that there was no cell phones, no WhatsApp, no Google, computers. So I'm happy because of that, because somehow you value more the things that exist today and you take advantage of it. And I believe that we need to adapt, of course, and there are big law firms, as Luca was saying, Garriga's now invested, I know how many millions on their own artificial intelligence for them. And I was talking with one of the partners who was saying, this is amazing. So that's true. But I believe that there's a point, and that really affects you, which is regarding artificial intelligence. It's going to be most value other kind of virtues from people that in organizations are going to be taken much more into account. So you have a tool that you have to use. Of course, you need to use it, but there are also things, and maybe to be constant, maybe that need of learning, maybe that need of also being in that sense fine in the legal point of view, some reasoning. And I'm even concerned because young people, and I tell that to my kids as well, that they're studying, and a few days ago they were preparing a case. They were saying, yeah, I put this on AI, and I was like, yeah, but how would you reason this? So there are many things that you need to be smart enough as to improve from their personal point of view, things that differentiate, and to be able to take advantage of that tool. And of course, there are things that are going to help us, and we were talking about it before. In the past, you were going to a trip because you had a cord and disconnect, which was also good. But now you have Wi-Fi even in the planes, and you can work, and that's also something that it makes your life easier. So I'm going to meet with a customer at 8 a.m. and I know that, okay, so I'll take my computer, then I'll get whatever I can work. So nowadays it's a lot more comfortable, but I think it's going to be more and more value to the people, to the person, because the person, regarding the virtues of that person, and even from the point of view of knowing how to delegate, of being generous at the work, all these things that seem silly is not silly, and that has a basic point when pointing out in the future. I think the difference will be the difference. The difference you will have artificial intelligence and other users who are going to use it are going to be your difference, how you apply it, how you think about it, how you reason. Because if you don't reason, artificial intelligence is not worth it, because that's going to give you the tools. But do we want it for this to replace us and for them to go to the meetings and FIFA and so we become robots? So that fine-tuning, that nuance of the human being is the one that we need to maintain, and is going to set the difference. If you're just going to base on AI by itself, and I was using telex, which is something that is before fax. So just imagine. But I use telex and fax, and now this for me is like if I was born with it. I'm born with it. And the human being has the facility to be able to adapt to everything. But you need to use it and not to abuse it. So when you abuse about this, as if you abuse the AI, not as lawyers, as human beings, you would use a lot. Questions of these first stage, I'm going to finish with 2 questions, and then we'll start with the questions from that stage. If you practice it, how much? I think it's compulsory. It's an obligation. I always feel fine after doing it, but I think it's an obligation to want to train. I also have an obligation with me. I love to run a compete, of course,
Muy poquito. Bueno,
but
no te cuento con las
lately
horas
it's
porque no.
just a few, just a very little sprints. In my case, as far as I can, I try to do some sports through the week. And for a year and a half, I started with boxing that I've have done. I've never done it, and it's a good way to get rid of the adrenaline that is generating. Skiing in winter time, but I can.
No, yo sí, yo en eso soy un poco germánico.
Yeah, in that sense, I'm a bit German, and I do every day at the same time, 1 hour, no matter what. Even if I'm outside, and even if I have a hearing, I kind of need it. It would be part of my, sometimes to relax my mind or to sort it out. I got used to it. I have my routine, and I practice sports. Even I think it's good even to go to sleep. Sometimes if we were on a trip, not unfrequent to find a Senn Ferrero clan running around in the city.
Yo no soy tan germánico, pero sí que
I'm not strict.
Pero una cosa que sí que hago a mis
Yeah, but there's something I do for my customers. I always ask a hotel with a swimming pool. I know which are the ones that have a swimming pool, and I go to the swimming pool because the swimming pool relaxes you before and after court or after a meeting. So a swimming pool. As I was saying, it's frequent to find is not frequent to go with Juan that he was without a bow tie, but then a swimming pool towards yeah, and I also have a swimming pool bow tie. And the last of this first stage, something that is difficult to answer, but I'm sure you have some answers. Have you not been sports to lawyers? What would you have liked to do? You were already a basketball professional. So after that, I don't know, probably now that we're talking about artificial intelligence, quite the opposite. Maybe painting. I would have liked that, something maybe less, more on the artistic part. Lucas, honestly, maybe something related to what we were talking about, to present something, acting, be part of the exposition and the convincing or interpreting. I like that. If you ask what I would like, that's the question. Rally pilot, not Formula One. Since I was a kid, it was rally. I've always liked speed, and I like to drive. So if you ask me, and I was always quite clear about it. People said, but not Formula One, no, rally. Do you know who was Ota was a rally driver? He was many things, and one of them was that I would have liked to do a war correspondent, like Pérez. This is someone that has to do with sports law, fighting every day with, a war correspondent. I would have liked, but then life takes you in a different way. Okay, now the first stage of questions, a bit personal, but not that personal because we talk about so many things. So we allow for people to ask both the ones that are online as you. If you have a question within that sector, then we'll have more questions that are more professional. No questions? Are there any questions? Do we have some kind of microphone? Because the lady over there. This is a Mexican, one of the good ones. Is this one of the Mexicans who come with me? I have 4 Mexicans coming from my side. 4 Mexicans.
De acuerdo a, y esto es una duda
This is a question of generation gap of younger generations with older generations. Experience. We lawyers live in walls, so if someone is in front of you, don't try to diminish him, say experience. Okay. What would be an advice or a virtue that you would transmit, that you were doing in a given way on your generation when you were young, and a virtue that you see this generation that now is something that we have to bear in mind? And to continue in that good path, because generation change and youth have impetus and is rebel, but times are different, and each generation has a specific characteristic. I'm going to answer because I am the most experienced. I know that, of course, there are many differences between generations, but I remember my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, my children, my grandson now, and myself. And there are values which are forever. And you would say, yeah, the grandfather that repeats those battles, those stories, but you need to know about it first. Effort. Without effort, there's nothing. Yeah, but it's really easy because my father was a bricklayer, and my mom worked at home. And although they say that there's no social pressure, there is. And there's a social that exists with an second will, which is not the same as effort, and that's being strict, being manic. Will. So today I will do this. There's a word now to procrastinate. In Spain we say to leave it for tomorrow. No, it's not for tomorrow, it's now. Even if it's just answer an email saying, I'm going to answer tomorrow. And the last one, it would be something that I would define as optimism, or to believe in yourself. Both things together. So I refuse to say I cannot do it. This is something out of my reach. I can do it if I have the will, and if I put in the effort, all of it together. That's the opinion from the granddad, and I mean it because I'm a granddad. Okay, so the second experience, guy. Yeah, I agree with what Juan was saying. When I started working and I started in Marbella, in the south of Spain, and I remember I met a lawyer who was really, really old. A lot older than me, yeah, a really lawyer. And I asked him, I was just beginning to work on a law firm, and I asked, what do I need to do to be a good lawyer? And he said, you have to be an organized person, your desk needs to be clean, and you need to answer all calls. Remember, there were no cell phones, so answer all calls. So there's something that been past this order, together with that, something that you have an added difficulty need to turn around is to overcome the comfortability that generates how everything is set up nowadays. I'm not saying that everything is simpler, but it's easier for you to get some things that were more difficult tomorrow. And now everything is immediate, and it happens a lot, even when you have to prepare something, that sometimes you see, and it happens to all of us, you just get a headline, people have problems to focus and to read, and quite often from legal point happens that people really don't deep dive in it. And I see it in some things that we talked about before, when you see that they're preparing a reply to a demand, young people, and they give you a thick layer of 65 pages, you realize that they did not deep dive to understand about the essence of what was going to be argued. And maybe these 65 pages could be 20, because they're getting things. You see that there is a bit of I take from this and I paste it, I take from this and I paste it. And that thing about overcoming, because I believe that maybe, and that's why I was saying that sometimes I think how lucky we were, because sometimes we leave that time and maybe going to the Aram Thadi and read in the sentence, and was a bit of a pain, but and about reading and reading. So you have to dedicate time to that. For me, at least, what it was good for me was that point of being disciplined and constant. It was mentioned before by Lucas that the secret here is like when people talk about Inditex. Oh, it's really successful. Yeah, but Mr. Amancio Ortega was working since the first day and he's still going to the office, so no business, nothing. And Jose was talking about before, you get on a stage where you have, and everything is about working and being constant, not believing, because you have to have self-esteem. Of course, I can achieve this, and quite often it's about putting in the hours, and you'll get it at the end. So that's to overcome a bit that. Lucas. A lot was said, and I believe we agreed. It's a very good question, the one you ask, and an intelligent question, I believe. If I look back when I started, of course, it's what you were talking about. It has nothing to do with anything. I was an intern without pay for 1 year. When I say without pay, I'm saying that for 1 year, I was paying gas, I was paying everything. And I never have any question, or I was pissed off, I was frustrated, but I would never question that I was when I wanted to be, to get to where I wanted to get. And I think this is really important to understand. There's nothing. Sometimes life, even if you want to get to some places, you're not going to do it because life just runs you over. But if you know where you want to get and you're willing to sacrifice for that, I think it makes sense. The point is if you're wasting your time and not being paid, but if you're in a place that you're learning things, that you've been trained, that you have reference above you from what you can learn, take advantage of it. Maybe it's not an ideal condition. Maybe you can have to dedicate a lot of hours. Maybe they don't pay you as much as you think you're worth it, but this is a path and you see the final destination. That's important. And from the Lucas from 25 years ago when I started, you have to recognize that because he was constant. As Juan was saying, adding all of that, he believed he could do it. And sometimes you're lucky and a number of factors align, but especially it's the work.
I used to work weekends and we've all done it here. It's nothing new, but it's a lot harder, of course, nowadays. We still do it. We still do it. To this day. We're not feeling sorry for ourselves. We love what we do, the four of us. But it is true that younger generations don't look kindly upon this. And I think new generations have a lot of virtues. They're super open-minded. They're very much technologically adept, which we're not. What I don't think is always there is the capacity for sacrifice and commitment. Not always, at least. Which means when we have to if I were you, be aware that we're not after the smartest cookie in the class. I want somebody who's committed. I want somebody who's not constantly pestering me about what time we finish on Friday, sometimes who's available to invest a little more of their own personal time in this, and someone who believes in themselves. That's what we're after. I think this is always going to exist. I've gone through similar experiences with my dad and with my son. It even happens, let's say, in tribal groups. There's even a film about it. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a film which is all about a young man challenging a tribal leader and then eventually apologizing because the tribal leader was right. The point of the film was that the young man and the old man each had a job to do, and they were different. And this is something I think that is always going to happen across generations. I think my colleagues have already tackled this issue extensively, but I think that what you do have is a capacity to accrue a lot of knowledge in very little time. It used to be a lot more difficult for us back in the day. I remember what we had to do back in the day to study or to send faxes. We had to send them 5 times faxes to Switzerland, for example, to make sure they were received on that end. Now things are very, very different. Now, we were talking about Spain earlier. Spaniards love Spain. I think we could be branded perhaps as maybe chauvinists a little bit, or at least that was the situation a few years back. Bottom line is, Spaniards, we love our country, but now Spain is opening up to other countries. We've got people here in Spain who speak multiple languages, who've been abroad, 30-year-olds even, whereas in my generation, 30-year-olds had hardly left their autonomous community here in Spain. So what I'm trying to say is that the world is changing, Spain is changing. All of these experiences comprise an incredible personal, let's call it baggage, that you can put to use later on in your profession. And it's great. And it's something that you all have. But as the old man said in the film, I can't remember the name of, this is something that's always there. It's a constant in life. Commitment, hard work. Hard work will always be required if you want to have success. Always. Hard work and commitment. And I think this obsession that we have in our society with immediacy is killing us. And I see that in my son, for example. Immediate gratification, that thing. Society is trying to tell us that rewards are always going to be received immediately, but that's not how it works, because if you want to get good at something, you have to make mistakes and grow. You have to go through thick and thin. You have to make mistakes. You have to experience the bitterness of failure. We as parents try to shelter our kids from all of that, and it's understandable, but you can't protect them forever. The most important thing, and I always say this to my children, if you're a hard worker, you're already above 50% of your competitors. This is really about the attitude you have, not your skills. It's more a question of what your attitude is. A lot of people that we hire lack the skills, perhaps, that are immediately required to work for someone like us, but they do have the commitment. They have the right attitude, and vice versa. We've turned down candidates who had the skills but lacked the attitude. Older people are experienced. That's a great advantage that they have, whether you like it or not. Experience is something great because it takes you, let's say, one step forward compared to others. And that's a question I always ask interviewees. Ask them, are you a good listener? Are you a hard worker? That's all I want to know. And that's a great foundation. Let me tell you a little anecdote about what Jose was saying about the importance of being a good listener. I was in Beijing a few years back in China. So I was sitting at a table surrounded by a few Chinese people, obviously, and I realized that when I took the floor, nobody would say a word. There was a sort of there was total silence when I took the floor. And one day I asked someone, why is it that whenever I take the floor, not a word is spoken in the room? And he said to me, look, here in China, we believe that bald people have lost their hair because they spent a lot of time in their lives thinking. And so we respect them and we listen when they speak. That's a great anecdote, but I think it illustrates the importance of learning. I agree with that. I like it. What you were saying earlier about immediate gratification, that sort of culture, it's important to be able to wait, to be patient. Younger people make mistakes. They think they don't deserve to be there at the law firm. That's not true. Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Life is not a Netflix show. We used to say in the past that life is not a Disney film. Life is not a Netflix show. Last question. Please. Well, I have two questions wrapped up in one. Good lawyer, but never say that. Say, I have one question and then mention the second one just in passing. Yeah, two questions. So first question is, what was the most gratifying thing that happened to you throughout your careers? And what were the negative experiences that you've had or the mistakes you made that helped you become better lawyers? What were the mistakes you made that helped you figure out how to be better humans as well throughout your careers? That was actually a question I was going to ask in the second block. So that's a great segue into the second block. Lucas, why don't you answer it first? Right, the most gratifying experience, the most rewarding experience in my life, I'd say. Looking back on it, it feels funny, but I'm from Barcelona. I'm a Barcelona fan, although I have to confess that I've lost some interest along the way and that I work with other clients as well, and they have all of my interest. I'm very happy when they win. I'm saying this just in case they're listening. Yeah, so I was a big Barcelona fan. I used to watch the games with my father. When I decided to become a lawyer, one of my goals was to one day represent Barcelona. Of course, I had more than just one goal, but it was one of them. So I remember the first time I saw my name alongside the Barcelona crest. I think that was very fulfilling for the sort of child in me. It was a special moment, and I have a very fond memory of it. About negative experiences, I just want to say that I fully agree with what Jose said. Negative experiences, the bad things that happen to you, especially those things that make your life very, very difficult in the moment, and true, that cause you a little grief, but that you're able to handle properly and come out on the other side, they're incredibly formative. Now, for me, my formative negative experience dates back to when I was studying my BA. I was an average student. I wasn't brilliant or anything. I didn't have any of that. But a very important exam at a certain point was coming up. It was just behind the corner. And it was an exam that if I failed it, I'd basically get kicked out of the university. So I prepared for it the same way I prepared for every other exam I ever took in my life, which was just knuckling down and studying and reading. The day before the exam, heading to the library, I had a motorbike accident. It was a bit of a dodgy accident. I passed out. I woke up and I was in the ambulance. I still had my helmet on. I couldn't move. And I asked paramedic, I have an exam tomorrow. Can I still do it? And he asked me, right-handed or left-handed? And I said, right-handed. And he said, then I'm afraid not. I looked at my hand and it was mangled, smashed beyond repair. So I couldn't take the exam. Obviously, I had mitigating circumstances, but I couldn't write for 3 months because my right hand was broken. So I had to learn to study in a different way than ever before. I started learning in a different way than ever before. I used to revise orally by just talking. I took that particular exam orally, and I got the top mark. I got an A with a mention. And that completely changed the way I approached studying forever. That accident, of course, the moment that happened, it was horrible, but it's made me a better lawyer today. It wasn't the only element, obviously, that came into play, but it was one of the elements.
Yo empezando por lo negativo, luego una cosa que decía antes Javier del ego, ¿no? Yo me acuerdo que tenía un
Right, starting with the negatives, I had this partner. We were in a meeting with a client, and I didn't like what he was saying. I didn't like what he was doing. So I interjected, and the second I interjected, I realized that my partner actually had a very good strategy. He was trying to sway the client very, very patiently, and I realized that I messed it up for him. And he looked at me, he was glaring at me, wanted to kill me. And I realized that my bloody ego had jeopardized our relationship with the client. How old were you? I was an adult because I started late. I was an adult. But earlier we were talking about skills. Well, knowing when you can talk, that's a good skill to have. And that one time, that was a disgrace. It was such an obvious mistake that I made. He looked at me, my colleague, glaring, saying, "Just destroyed 20 minutes worth of hard work." Eventually, it all panned out. We kept the client, but it was a horrible mistake. But an upside I could perhaps highlight in my career. As a player, I played in Greece, I played in Italy. As a player, I realized that what we lacked as players were advisors. So one of the finest moments in my career was when my own friends, athletes that I'd played with, I was able to help them as an advisor, as a consultant, because nobody else was offering that service at the time, but I was, and I was helping people that I loved because I'd worked with them and I'd played with them, and they really appreciated everything I did. And so, yeah, that was great. That was very rewarding. What about you? Yes, well, I agree with them, with both Lucas and Jose. I think negative experiences make you stronger. Things that now I look back on and I'm very happy about in the moment were a bit, tough. Having to travel, for example, to and from Madrid all the time, or the criticism I received from several people for going to private universities, stuff like that. Well, I have to say I paid for it myself. I paid for my BA myself out of my own pockets. I didn't have any money at all when I graduated. That was all very, very difficult. But I did come out on the other side thanks to commitment and dedication. And rewarding moments, I think one can perhaps relate to it because we're a little bit on the older side. There are two things that I find particularly rewarding. One is that back in the day, this wasn't a highly professionalized sector of the law, and a lot of people kept telling me, "No, you're never going to be able to do this. You're never going to be able to become a sports lawyer. Such a thing does not exist." People kept telling me. I told people that I wanted to work at Roland Garros. People said, "No, that's going to be impossible." They thought it was impossible, but now, of course, I do it, and that's very rewarding. And it's very, very rewarding to see how professional this sector has become over time. And another thing I love, and this is something that often happens in arbitrations, for example, it still happens to me nowadays, is that at hearings, you learn so much. You go to a hearing and you learn so much. You realize that both the arbiters and the other party are right. You realize that because you're learning, and that's rewarding as well. Learning from, let's say, your colleagues or even your opponents at a particular in a particular court case or hearing. That's absolutely great. It's very rewarding. Lifelong learning. It's great. We often talk about this. It's good to feel, for example, nervous for something important that's coming up in your life. If you don't feel nervous for that, that's actually a bad thing. If you're overly confident, that's a bad thing. What you need is some nerves, some jitters, some stage fright. Obviously, you get over it after a while, but it's a feeling that I just love to have. For me, whenever I go to a hearing, I'm all right. I don't get nervous. My motto is ABC, always be cool. On the outside. But on the inside, I'm a volcano. I want my clients, the other party, to see that I'm cool, that I'm calm, but on the inside, I'm a volcano. Now, negative experiences, rewarding experiences, it's difficult to say. Whether you win or lose, that's over in a minute and a half. Well, it is rewarding, of course, to be working in sports law because, again, this didn't exist back then. My career began in 1981. I was still a law student. At the time, nobody wanted to hear about it. But now it is a recognized field, and I look at you and I see a plethora of students, plethora of masters throughout the world, and that's so rewarding. Negative things, I don't want to mention that because I don't want to talk about anything negative today. So on to the second block. What is the most important case, or rather, the case that you felt happiest to win? What's your most important victory as a lawyer? I know it's a difficult question. Jose, let's start with you. If you like, if not, we can move on. Yeah, okay, I'll take it. It is difficult to pick just one, but even something personal, if you'd rather. Well, for me, the most rewarding thing was to be able to represent my former teammates in a different format as an advisor. And that for me was very, very rewarding. Because I've been able to create something new. People all of a sudden became aware that consulting was an important part of the game. Here in Europe, players feel like they're excluded from the business side of their activities, but in the US it's very, very different. Players that are very much involved in the businesses they've set up over the years, they are active stakeholders, and in Europe it's a little bit different. Although I have to say in basketball perhaps it's a little bit easier because we get players who come to Europe from the NBA and they had a different mindset. But that to me is rewarding as well. Right, for me, it's difficult to pick one case, one victory. When you win, it is true that in the moment you're happy, but that feeling sort of fades quickly. I have to say, however, that losses and the feeling you get from them tend to linger a little bit more. But to answer your question, this is a funny story actually, because it was a victory for me. Back in the day, my firm was working with Madrid juveniles, and FIFA penalized, fined Real Madrid for a breach of Article 19. So it was a very dramatic case, a lot of media pressure on us, a difficult case. Now we were able to substantially reduce the fine, because initially 30 players were involved. We narrowed it down to 2 players only, so we substantially reduced the fine. And Javier, who is director of the juvenile program, would disagree, because he doesn't regard this as a victory. But for me, it is a victory. I think this was the result of a lot of hard work, and I was very happy about that. There are many other victories along the way, of course, but that's not something we should dwell on, I don't think. Of course, there's a lot of personal satisfaction involved. It's great for the client, but that's it. Personal satisfaction. As an aside, I just wanted to say that when I started, there was a case that was quite important. Back in the day when I started, you'd actually get a chance from time to talk at length with judges. The situation was very, very different. As Jose was saying, it's difficult to pick just one case, just one victory. I've had, many gratifying moments throughout my career, a lot of letdowns as well, a lot of disappointments. But I'd say that it is particularly rewarding to see how your relationship with certain people evolves over time. There are some managers, coaches that you sign a contract with or for, and the minute you do it, you know they're going to breach it, and that you're going to get called in to sort out whatever problem they've gotten themselves into. And when you do, well, of course, that's rewarding. Professionally speaking, because sometimes you get a case where you didn't draft a contract, so it's not your responsibility that the contract was breached or voided, but when it's your responsibility and you manage to fix it, in the end, it's a lot more satisfying, it's a lot more rewarding. In this sector, it's particularly important to fully understand what preventative law is all about. Building, drafting, ironclad, bulletproof, watertight contracts. That's very interesting as well. It's an interesting side. This reminds me of a case of doping in motorbike racing and motor racing. I'm thinking of a 23-year-old athlete who moved away from Australia to Europe to pursue his dream of becoming a motorbike racer, but he was caught red-handed using drugs. He was suspended from competition for 2 years, but he wanted to compete. So we went to a hearing asking that he be allowed to compete by arguing that the 2-year sentence should be considered as having begun to run when he was caught, not when the sentence was issued, when the ruling was issued. And we won that case, actually. We won that case. He was able to return to competition a lot sooner than he thought. So this made me very happy, because this athlete didn't want the money. He wasn't after the money. He just wanted to compete. And he was able to, thanks to us. And that was very rewarding. Anyway, let's move on to something else. This is a tougher question. What was the situation you felt most uncomfortable with as a lawyer, with your clients, with arbiters, with third parties, judges? What was the most uncomfortable situation that you've ever had to face as a lawyer?
poquito el que haya cierta corrupción que todavía.
Well, for me, it was rather disappointing to see that there still is some corruption out there. Increasingly less, granted, but there still is some corruption. Is something that you have to fight against, of course, and unfortunately, it's something I've experienced firsthand myself. I remember there was this case where a federation had to fine a club for a breach of contract, but the president of this particular club was also the president of the federation, so no fine was issued. And that's sad. It's very sad when you see that. You should have been fined. The right punishment, I think, for that club would have been relegation, but that never happened. And I protested against this, and I got a call from the president of the club, and he asked me, "What do you want? Why are you doing what you're doing?" And I couldn't understand the question. I said, why are you even asking that? He asked me, "What do you want?" And I realized later he was trying to bribe me, so I would drop the case. I know that this is changing. It has changed a lot, and it is still changing. But for me, seeing that the system in certain ways is corrupt, that certain bodies are corrupt, is deeply saddening for me. When you lose because your counterparty simply outperformed you, that's fine. I accept it. But when there's corruption involved, I hate it. And I think there's a little bit of that left in our sector. Yeah, something along those lines for me. This is a sad reality check for me. Some things still happen nowadays at a certain level when, with certain cases, you get to see it, and it's sad. I think the happy moments far outnumber the sad moments. In sports law, I think we virtually all know each other, that we comprise a relatively small group of people, getting larger. Increasingly more people are coming in nowadays, but we all know each other, and we all have a good relationship with one another. For example, Javier and I happened upon one another at a hearing last week, and then we occasionally also refer cases to one another. So we have a strong bond. There's a lot of respect involved, and when somebody lets you down, the same you'd be, disappointed if a friend did it, you're disappointed when a colleague does it. But anyway, the good things far outnumber the bad things. Bad things are something you have to live through in your life, and when it happens, come out the other side a little bit stronger. Well said, well said. Particularly because you didn't say anything. So well played.
Yeah, I would say it in a bit different way too. One more on the other side and more on the other one, more about self-punishment. One is what Lucas was talking about, that quite often you are spoiled because you have professional colleagues with whom you have a lot of fights, but there's a code, I don't know if it's a friendship, but we know that we help as much as we can, although quite often you cannot help each other because it's adversarial. But you have that difference and your and sometimes friendship, and it happens with a friend who silly asks, "Okay, this transfer you did, how do you do it?" And I said, "No, we did it this way." And he said, and it was hard, but I was bothered me is, okay, he went to find a player because he would get 15%, and he said, like, he did this, you could ask for that, and he couldn't. And I said, like, man, you cannot do that. You cannot ask how I did that, and they would do it public on the next day, but you cannot do that to go and try to shoot two of us. That's not the way it is. That's not the way things are done. A law way, which is more personal, when I went to a court, I find a really experienced colleague with you, he said, look on it, and he had just runs it, and he had like 2 folders, everything ready. He said, I'm going to try and suspend this because I understand it's not appropriate. I said, well, I've been preparing this for 2 weeks. So we get to the courtroom, and the other guy says, Your Honor, I would like to congratulate you for your promotion to the Supreme Court. And I say, well, we are done. So he was speaking with such calm. He knew nothing about what the suit was about. And he just one sheet of paper, and I said, I want to be like that guy. And I kept hitting him and then going over him. And he could not do any more with less. And this is what I want to be. He gave me such a live lesson, a guy from the other side that only had one seat. So I left knowing that I was going to win, but because it was impossible not to win. But he like dominated the whole thing, so that I'm going to look like that guy. Anything that, can give that sense of impression of control in a courtroom, of dominating the situation. I have something similar to Javier's in 1995. A player with his new agent says we have to pay attention to the application of end of contract before the previous agent has sent it. This agent knows me and calls me on the phone. Juan, Dios, I have the operation done with the new club. Yeah, but it was not talking to the player for 1 year, and there was no WhatsApp and no single contact, so he doesn't want to be with you. Sorry. And then he said, yeah, but I have the club already. And if you help me, there will be something for you. It will be 50 million pesetas, like 300,000 euros. But in 1995, you could buy 4 or 5 houses with that. And I said, I couldn't hear you. And he started repeating the question of the request. And I said, no, that I couldn't hear you, that this question did not exist on your side. I don't know anything about that. So we could have been rich, been disastrous, but if one is an honest person, you can make a living, but richness is for somebody else. So those are the complicated moments, but you also need to know, like this guy, that his customer didn't know that he didn't know anything, but it seems like he knew everything. So the reaction of 2 guys with a colleague, you talk a bit about that, but I would like to deep dive a bit in relationship with customers, because customers are friends, friends are customers. Do you want them to be friends or not? First colleagues and then customers. You start. With colleagues, and Lucas was talking about it, they were saying, and it was even less before, but we lived a time where it was really small, and now it's growing a lot thanks to places like this one. Of course, there's people a lot more prepared than when we were at the beginning, Lucas and myself. But when we started, it's true that there's always been some kind of code where we all help each other, pass a client, and we help each other. And, it's not to sell it, but there's that come except for your colleague. Yeah, but that's the exception. That's not the normal thing to do. Or if someone's going to hit you, but they call you first, and they say, look, someone told me that I have to beat you up, and you may be right or wrong, but I have that order, and you find that kind of stimuli and interactions between lawyers. And then on the side of customers, I think it's really difficult. Each customer is a world, and I believe that the profession of a lawyer, especially in our industry, or the way it is and how it mediates and markets and so on, you need to understand that a lot of the immediacy of the market, the way you see it at least, is that there are many customers that didn't have big assets. They just have 1 or 2 assets that are selling in the market, and that doesn't happen. They have no money on that asset, so they paying attention or taking care of that asset is big. And you become kind of a coach, you're kind of a psychologist, because you're a guy as a person, you understand the problem, you understand the industry, you know secrets nobody else does. So it's really difficult quite often for not to be considered as a friend, maybe not a friend of a friendship. You have more information than their friends. It happens with me, with many clients that I know more about relevant things of this guy, and then his friends. And when they say, yeah, you understand this, I'm like, well, I can talk about it, but I have more information. So I believe that with the client quite often is really difficult, that there's not that relationship, maybe not a friendship, like when someone you've been growing up together, but you share tons of things because of the trust he needs to have in you. And sometimes he looks for you like a prudence or objective element. The man of the coach. Okay. I already mentioned about it, and to emphasize what Jose said, in this circle where we are, we are always together, and when good things happen, and I like it in the courtroom, when we hit each other hard, no query, always been respectful, because that's really important, but always defending the client's interest to the maximum. Sometimes I went and looking forward, and you were all in and all that, and that's even part of it. And when we have this situation, this is over, we shake hands, we even hug, and we go for dinner or for a beer, and that's a great advantage I get in this world. And some clients don't understand that. They see you with the opposite side, and they think that you reach an agreement. Yeah, sometimes it's difficult to explain to the client. I understand that, and sometimes I explain it because they understand, and they live it on a given way. And suddenly you're hugging the friend of the opposite side, like if you're best friends, and he sees you before when you're wearing the gloves, and it's like a sore circuit in his brain. But it's part of that relationship we have, and then the courting goes up, and there's no courting. But regarding customers, and that's the way it is, I believe that clients, there are all kinds of clients, and of course some you get closer, or there's just say, okay, look at this contract, you look at it, it's okay. But quite often this goes beyond that, and they can look for you for all the matters. And there's a trust that is generated, that there's close to a personal relationship, and they involve you in the problem. And I believe it's an interesting question. How much are you going to get involved? Is it always professional? My experience is that sometimes, and I try more and more to find that border, professional, whatever you want, personal, because if you make their problem your own, then the lawyer suffers, and it could be even damaging for the case. I'm not saying not pay attention to it. You have to be aware of it. There have to be some boundaries. You cannot stay awake because somebody else's problem. You have to stay awake by looking for solutions and doing a proper job. But I say that, and that's difficult, and sometimes you worry, and sometimes that generates this when you see unfair situations and things like that. But I also have some things with this. You do everything, and then the client suddenly behaves really poorly with you. He doesn't pay, he doesn't recognize the service, and that's also a hard thing with this, and that allows you to learn because it's part of the whole thing of you learning of how difficult this is. I learned that I'm not going to get involved like this because this is not really my problem. I have to set boundaries. I need to know what limits are, and this is something that you understand with the exercise, how you see the older people, how they do it. The ones who are your partners, the one who train you, your mentors, how you manage that. I agree with what was said regarding colleagues. It's true that and that's nice in the sector. Even I believe that there's another point where and that happens to me, that sometimes when you see who's the opposing party, you even prefer that these are lawyers that you recognize as good lawyers, because maybe the client says, okay, these guys are ready and they can, and also that at the end of the day, you're going to be able to talk with them. And those quotes Jose was talking about, you're going to be able to talk about things, and you are calmer. Maybe technically you would have preferred to have another who's a bit worse, but you rather to have this because you speak in the same language, you know that you're going to be able to talk about it. And when customers, I agree with that. It's kind of difficult because there's that effect, that point where the customer wants, and think that quite often when there are sports people, they're going to be, of course, younger than us, but even younger than the youngest who are working in the law firm. So I will always say, these are not your colleagues, these are not your friends, because it's easy to become a friend of that person. A different thing would be that over time, and you have to be recognized on the technical part. You have to solve the technical part. And from that, you get to the point that if you help this person on the technical side, there's going to be a relationship that is going to be consolidated over time, and he's going to call you with everything. And this happens with another one of our clients. There's a moment that this person calls all the time. Like Sunday, I remember 11:30 p.m. and the phone rings. I was asleep and I see that. I listen to the phone. I hear the phone. I said, okay, 11:30 at night, I'm not going to do this. And I see that she calls again, and I'm again thinking, okay, I'm in bed. And when I see that, I notice that my wife's phone is also ringing, and I hear my wife saying, no, it's that he's already asleep. So he had called my wife, and I had to get up, and I said, well, this is amazing. And it was something silly, but that's the effect that I needed to talk to you. And in a given moment, you have to say, well, it's good that you call my wife, because maybe my wife is thinking, what is this? So I don't know how she got the phone, but she called her. And there's a point where that's difficult because, and it's what Jose was saying, these are people really young that they need. So maybe you're not talking with the president of Fujitsu that has 40,000 things, is an external lawyer, and they have the problem, and you have to solve that. And also, I believe that from the more sports person point of view, and that happened to me, that some people believe that because you were or you are a sports person, you're 21 years old, you know about everything because you have money. And the only thing you do is to get laid and play the sports you play in. And I'm 22 years old. I don't need to know about real estate, about insurance, and so on. I have the ability, the economic ability, to be able to reach to many things that maybe my friends from high school cannot do. But I have neither the maturity nor the knowledge of knowing about that. And people think you're stupid because of that. And what they have is they're really insecure because I move really well on the wall. That is the one I move around. But the other wall is aggressive because everyone wants your money and you don't know who you have to go with or who you have to be with. And when you're a place that someone helps you, that's easier. But when you don't, those calls are really understandable and they affect you a lot. And I understand because it's someone who's saying, I have this, but I don't have the tools to solve that. And quite often it's really demanding time-wise and love-wise, because at the end of the day, you need to understand that many things, these people don't have the necessary tools to face those problems. They have it for the kind of problems. They have it for the kind of industry, or maybe not an industry field, which is to play. But what they're missing is that tool that you can provide or that a third party can provide. Regarding lawyers, I agree with you, Javier. I like to have people who are prepared in front of me, and if it's a known, even better, because it's easier to reach agreement. And there's a feeling that is a lot more comfortable. And if it's people who are just looking for prestige or to win a case on someone, and they are a lot more aggressive than you need to be, I don't really like that, but you have to deal with it. So I'm happy when I see that, oh, okay, these are the guys I'm facing. These are the usual suspects, and that's good. And then on the other thing, and I have a theory, as people were saying that we take no prisoners. I think we take no friends. And a client cannot be a friend. Many clients want to be friends and they call you again and again, let's go for dinner, let's go for that. I try to set the limit because I rather to have them closeness, and they call you and you answer and you try to take care of them in the best possible way. But friendship is different. And they believe that because you're a lawyer, because you solve really important things of life, honor, money, you're going to be their friend, and you're not a friend. Quite often you need to set boundaries, so it's complex. I know it's difficult, but you have to set that boundary and to know where you have to go. Of course, you cannot reject lunch, dinner, but if they invite 3 or 4 times to their place, you can say, no, I have other things to do. You have to do it gently because you don't want to lose the client. But there's not to do it more than once. Because if you do it twice or 3 times, it's like it's compulsory for you. Oh, you don't come into this. I have people here. And so I know it's good for marketing, big clients, but I've decided that I have the friends I have, and the client needs to be in a different position. Any temptations, of course. And deep down, I believe that's something that is also really important. That is that something that one of the values is to be honest, and if you're honest about ethics is really important, and in the future I believe would be even more relevant with everything, because at the end of the day you work in a sector where maybe what Jose was talking about, sports people are insecure, there's an environment, and it happens a lot with some family members from sports people who they believe that they have money and they're sports people as well. And there's a lot of a temptation maybe that if you get into that world, and as Juan was saying before, maybe it's easy to get richer, but that's not the way, because if you go down that path, it's short term. The family members are called pseudo sports people because they believe they're sports people and that they play like the son or the daughter. But it's not, no, you're the father or the mother or the cousin. Because there are tons of cousins who are not cousins, and I know players that have 15, 20 people living at their place. I always say that you are mature when sometimes a customer says, come here and have dinner, and when you actually you would rather go home and you're saying, I'm not going and I'm going home, then it's like, okay, I'm mature now. You got to the point when you can control yourself. Yeah, and that's a difficult task, and we'll talk about it on the next stage of questions about marketing and so on. But now we're going to have questions, 2, 3 questions about this aspect. We're not going to limit the aspect. You can ask whatever you want, but 5 minutes, 3, 4 questions tops. Thank you all for that willingness to teach, that you transmit further information. Yeah, this gentleman is with me, right? Good. Okay. Yeah, you have to ask it. Let's see your question now. So in these 2 issues, we talk about discipline, we talk about hard work, effort, place things on a given point of view, the good and evil is going to be learning by itself. But my question is around the surroundings. So how the surroundings will favor very more difficult operations, and if you could provide some examples in your wide experience of how environment, understanding that it's a profession or internationalization, like going to countries with legal differences, with different cultures, we're talking about languages as such, but how the environment had make easier or more difficult and important operation in your lives. If you can share that about it. We know that ball guys have to go to China. I'm close to go there. We have to go to China being bald. I wear a fake wig, like it takes your hair away, like in the movies. So we start with Lucas and then you guys. I was thinking, obviously, there are a number of factors when there's an operation, when you have a situation about cultural factors, we're talking about family factors, situations when you have to deal, when you have to assess someone, and there are a number of voices over there. Sometimes there goes distortion, and this makes it a lot more difficult to the decision making. So when you're involved in some things and there's a lot of people, you have to go through a lot of filters, the agent, the brother, and at the end of the day, and I don't really like that. I try to be clear about it. We're going to work on a given moment. We have to work the way I say. If you're looking for my services, we're going to work on the way I believe we need to work. Otherwise, you can go to other firms, really good people that can help you in that sense. So I like to set a bit how things are going to be done when I'm flexible and reasonable. I'm not someone who says, okay, this is the way, my way or the highway, but there are some boundaries that I like to respect when I'm there. And if that's not the case, then we have to get serious. And there are things you cannot change. We're talking about culture, we're talking about situations or negotiations. I was saying before, when you're negotiating is not the same, and I can assure you it's really different when you're negotiating with a Chinese person or when you're negotiating with in Europe, or but not because of any specific thing, because these are different cultures, and it was difficult for me to understand when I was moving in cultures that were completely different, because we tend to understand and we used to understand the why, or to see where this is coming from. And if you don't understand that country, or you don't know that way of being, you get lost in that. I was remembering in China a long time ago, we had some negotiations and they would not give me an answer. And I was insisting and insisting, and no answer. And you get nearly to be rude because they're not giving an answer. And for them, it's really difficult to say no. So they don't answer. They don't give you an answer to what you're answering, because to say no is rude. China changed a lot. I'm talking of China as an example because there are many others, but that changed a lot. What's Western like, and we know more about it. But it's sometimes that is really important. So it's important to have local lawyers when you go to foreign jurisdictions to negotiate. It's something that I recommend a lot. People be fast within that jurisdiction to help you, not just with language, but to understand the different nuances. I think it's important. Javier. Yep. I believe the environment at the end of the day quite often is complex. I believe it's important, at least as Lucas was saying, to set some rules, because you need to know who your customer is. And if it's the sports person, you need to talk with this person. And quite often they're going to try to veto that possibility, because there's many people in the middle, the parents, the brother, the representative, the agent. So I believe it's really important in that case to know who this person is and to try and defend the interest of this person, to explain it, talk to the person. And there are many. I remember also with someone from entertainment, but with a female singer who has a really important moment. She was really young and so on. And I remember that everything was like a big problem. And there was a moment where I asked, what's going on? And she said, there's a moment when she said, I need you to come to talk to my parents, especially my dad, because at the end of the day, he's spending all my money. And it's true that I noticed how difficult it was for her, because I remember I had that meeting that was with nearly the whole family, quite unpleasant, because the whole family was there. And the father was saying, telling you what's the problem if this is for her brother, this is for the other brother, this is for that, and then I burn the money. Like saying I would burn whatever monies remain. Okay, so burn it after you pay taxes, because then your daughter will have a problem. But then also, this is your daughter's money. So on the part of the sports, at the end of the day, there's a lot of weight on the sports people. Even if you work for a club, the ones who are doing the thing is the sports people. So the environment is really difficult, and that's something that we have to know how to handle as well. It's important, but for instance, I believe it's positive that nowadays, we were saying before, the idea is that lawyers are a problem, a burden, and sports people are more and more trained. Of course, it's going to depend a lot on countries, because there are countries where they don't really know about it and needs to evolve, but I'm sure that in all countries it will evolve. I believe the environment in the business of football, it's because of many things. I would say two mainly, as Javier was saying. Suddenly, being really young, you're making a lot of money. Someone with 15, 16, 17 years old is making tons of money, and it's difficult for your family not to be there. And I'm not even talking about in a good way or a bad way. It's your money. Yeah, if you're underage, it has to stay. if you're underage, what can you tell? You cannot tell your father what he's doing with it. So that's kind of one of the problems. And also that's connected to the causalization, not just with the money, but with people who's been with you for your whole life, and what are the concepts of family and surroundings and so on. It has happened quite often to me, and I'm mentioning one specific one. And the agent said, you need to talk to a player, Jose, because his best friend is saying that he wants to get into a business. The business is going to be the mother, the father, and everything. And if I say that, I'm going to lose the player. I don't have the ability to say no, because the other guy is going to get him against me. And then I told you what you need to do. Let's see how you do it. And that is not bad for me. Not that is for you from what you've seen. And so what we tried to achieve was, how can I tell you that it's great that you give money to your friend, but just give it to him. Yeah, I'll give him a loan or something, and it works, and then you see if you want your part, and if it's wrong, okay, you lend money to your friend, and that's it. But this that is very quickly that we told you about is 3 weeks of suffering from an agent saying how to tell one of my young players not to do anything with his best friends and parents who have taken care of they were like a second family and all that. So it's complex. So at the end of the day, I believe that the environment is sometimes really positive, but other times it's kind of complicated. And when there's a lot of money, people don't feel that they're part of that money is theirs. So it's really difficult to manage and to be independent. A lot or a little, I don't. It's not important for being millions. There are fights for 100,000 euros per year. They want 120,000, so the father can get 20,000. And the club said, okay, this kid is 16 years old. We're not giving more than 100. I have a case, of course, I'm not going to mention names. The environment was complex. A player who signs an important contract to his 2 agents, the father and myself, we go for dinner. And while we were having dinner, the father said, and 40 agents and his son, doctor, we know where that can come from in Latin America, and doctor, he said, what if we get rid of these 2 guys and you and me do this together 50-50? And the 2 agents were looking at me like saying, like, Juan de Dios, if he says yes, he will take these players, a really important one in the world of football, and we get nothing. I was the lawyer of the agents for a long time, and I didn't want to be an agent, and I thought that the environment was bad for the son. So I said, no, I would never be able to understand you. In what sense? No, because you need someone that pay attention for 24 hours a day. And I have other customers, I have a family and so on. So I recommend you stay with them. And they did, and they're still working together after many years. So complicated environment, but you need to be able to manage it. You need to be able to, Johan Cruyff used to say, too young with too much money. And the environment was also used in Barca. Cruyff was using that. Okay, another question. These 3 ones, that's it. 1, 2, and 3. In a world as public and regarding environment, how do you manage the press, especially with headlines and so on? How do you manage with that extra pressure of having the press in it?
Let me give you some recent example. About 1 month ago, I was interviewed by an online media webpage that I didn't know. They asked me a few questions. Got an award. And then a few years back, when I just started, I got a call from one of the 2 most important papers here in Spain, and they asked me a couple of questions which I couldn't answer. And this journalist said, okay, it doesn't matter. tell me the truth, or I'll tell a lie, which shows that fake news are not necessarily a recent thing. They've always existed. As a lawyer, I couldn't wrap my head around it. Now, sports press is a bit different. They're not as professional as the rest of the press. In the last board meeting of Seville FC, I think there were about 150 journalists. And today I spoke to them because I represent a group of American shareholders which hold about 40% of the club. And this was the place where they called me Bozheimer, and the press reported on that. But what I'm trying to say is you need to be careful with the press. Give them little information, if any, but try and get along with journalists, because otherwise, they won't hesitate to bring you down. I remember I got into a spat once with a journalist, and I told him, look, here in Spain, our fees are called honorarios. That comes from the word honor. And that was my answer. Anyway, you have to speak to the press, give them as little information as you can, but you have to get along with them. I think it's a little bit easier when you're as a lawyer. It's a little bit easier. As an athlete, you can't do that. That's happened to me before as an athlete, but as a lawyer, I talk to the press. It's all right. I don't mind it. It would serve you well to have a good relationship with the press, of course. But I remember there was once an argument in the locker room, and I got a call later that night from a journalist asking me what happened in the locker room, why I'd argued with my classmates, and I told him, look, what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room. You can ask if you want. I'm not going to tell you that. And it was difficult to react that way because it meant that for 6 months, no matter how well I played, the press, well, that particular paper would, in a way or another, bring me down. If I played well, then, I had too much swagger. If I didn't play well, obviously it was because I didn't play well. So it's a little bit tricky. The life of a journalist is also not easy because, they need to get their hands on juicy information, and they're willing to go great lengths to do that. As a player, as a manager, as a coach, you're faced with lots of pressure as well, of course. It's just the way it is. And that happens every day in the press. The press has a lot of power. One was saying the fourth estate, as it's called, and it can sway opinions as well, the press. I remember a former president of Real Madrid. We had a very good relationship. And he told me once that I shouldn't read what the press said. And I said, why not? Well, because I don't make decisions based on what the press said. If you do, it's not my problem. It was fine. I didn't mind it, but that's what I told him. And he was very much aware of how important it was to handle the press, the pressure and everything else.
Descarado, descarado.
Yeah. Very cheeky, that, wasn't it? Yes. Me as a lawyer, it is tempting when you're working on a high-profile case where you have a, you know, where you're faced with a lot of media pressure to attempt to maybe, talk to the press in a certain way, but keeping a low profile is, I think, will always serve you best. That's the best way to handle it, I think. Low profile, clients don't like you talking to the press about their business, so don't do that. Sometimes your client will ask you to talk to the press for whatever reason, but not always. And yeah, we said this earlier. I was working for one of the big clubs here in Spain once. We were in a very confidential meeting, a very important meeting as well. We had to leave our phones outside of the room because, again, it was a matter of the utmost confidentiality. I left the meeting, got into a taxi, the radio was on, and a journalist was reporting on that meeting, telling exactly how many people had attended it, what was discussed, etc. What am I trying to say? The press have their means, okay, to acquire information. It is true that they can sway public opinion one way or another. I think as lawyers, we have to, you know, simply concentrate on our profession. We are experts of on the law, and that's what we need to focus on, and that's it. I think I agree with Luca. When I came here to Real Madrid, the only thing the partner from Guerrillas told me is, I'm asking one thing and one thing only of you. I don't want to read about us in the press, please. I remember that very well. I came here to Real Madrid. Jorge Valdano was sports director at the time, and he'd always tell me, because I was so obsessed with not making headlines, you know, I wouldn't leave my documents lying around for fear of, you know, them being lifted and leaked to the press. I used to lock my office whenever I go to the bathroom, and Jorge Valdano told me, you need to calm down, you need to chill out. Sometimes it's just inevitable. Sometimes journalists have their ways of finding news, and they're very good at that. You just do you and worry about your job, and that's it. Last week, Lucas and I bumped into one another at the hearing, as he said earlier. And I remember back then my client was asking me to be extra careful with the information of the court case, and I told them, of course, I'm a lawyer. I know how important confidentiality is. There's been a change since social media became so important. When Zidane came here, I was flown in. I came in. We worked together for the weekend, drafting the contract, and then I left. And as I was leaving, Zidane asked me, "Are you not going to stay for the signing of the contract?" I said, "No, I have to go to Barcelona because I had to draft Iniesta's contract, in fact." But from the office, the Madrid office, they told me, "No, you have to be here because we need your help to handle the press." Now that, back in the day, made sense. Nowadays, not anymore really, because you've got social media. You can get your news pretty much anywhere. I write for the press once a week. I write for a Spanish paper, for a national paper, for a Valencia paper, and I always tell about my version of the events. So it is one thing for the press to try and control you, and then it's an entirely different matter for you to make an attempt to control the information that is shared with the public. That's something you can do. Anyway, any more questions? First off, good evening and thank you. I've got two questions, well, one for Javier and one general question, taking into account the experience you've had with the Ecuador Football Federation. What advice would you give us so that we can make it in Ecuador as sports lawyers? What do you think we should do to really create a sports law culture and better represent the country, Javier? And then general question, what would you recommend we do in terms of who do you think we should talk first, the CMT or go straight to court whenever we need that? What is preferable? Okay, my top advice would be this. This is happening in Ecuador, but it is the case in other countries. There is a bit of a void, but it is a great thing that young people are training to further professionalize this sector. This reminds me of what happened in Mexico, for example. We opened our branch in Mexico a few years back, I think 7 years ago. Now we've got 100 people working there. So that was a relatively fast process. We established this branch of our firm in Monterrey, and it works really well. And I think of Mexico right now as a country which is where we were at about 15, 20 years ago, but it's growing quickly. So the first thing I think you should do is set up a sort of advisory system where you can work as advisors for players. That's the most important thing, and that's where you should start. And then Juan was saying earlier that it is true that we have a strong sports law culture here in Spain. Not because we're smarter than everyone else, it's just because we committed to it. We were determined to create a strong sports law culture. So I think as soon as you start offering the services, you will begin to professionalize the sector. Me, I've got lots of clients in that area. And what you have to do is train. You have to, go out there, take an interest in this field, train, acquire experience, find out how other systems work, and go back Ecuador to nurture in a way your own country. Sometimes it's difficult because certain, let's say, internalized dynamics are very difficult to change, but you're doing the right thing, I think. Here in Spain, 40 years ago, lawyers or club presidents knew nothing about the law. There were no masters. So about the DMT, we're not going to be talking about it here today because we actually have to give a class about it. Right, yeah, we'll tell you in class, don't worry. Yeah, so we were also talking about clients wanting to be friends with their lawyers and that we should set some boundaries, but sometimes the opposite is also true. Sometimes the client will come to you and they won't tell you the whole truth. I think that's a recurring theme in our profession as well, because when you don't have all the relevant information, you're limited in what you can do, which can lead to mistakes, to errors on our part, because we don't have all the information. And so what's your advice to deal with these situations? What is it we can do to, keep that from happening? Well, for me, it's very simple. If my client doesn't tell me the truth, they're not my client. That's it. I'll never work with them ever again. Because it doesn't make sense if they do it. It's cheating, isn't it? They're cheating me, they're failing me. No, it doesn't make sense. If you're not telling you the whole truth, it doesn't make sense to work with them. There's cases and cases, of course. In certain cases, you don't need to know everything, but in most cases, to be honest, you do. And so you need to be good at telling those cases apart, but you should be aware that lying to your lawyer is like lying to your doctor. You're really harming yourself, your chances of success. This never happened to me per se that I know of anyway, but it did happen to a colleague of mine. If a colleague of yours gives you, sorry, if a client of yours gives you some information which turns out to be false, then that can have repercussions on you as a lawyer, as a professional, and that's very, very serious. And so it is important that clients be made aware of that. I agree with José. If you see something that you don't like, if you think you're being cheated or lied to by your client, if you don't like your client, then you have to say it. You have a right to say it. And you have to show the moral integrity and the determination to just step away from it and tell them that there's other lawyers out there. Sometimes something that makes it a bit difficult to know whether you're being lied to or not is that they think they're telling the truth, but really they're not, because they're lying to them. That changes things a little bit, because in that case, what you have to do is help your client look at the situation more objectively. And that's a different approach. It's an entirely different approach, because in that case they haven't lied to you. They just lied to themselves. But this happened to me on many occasions. Sometimes, I get told things. And the clients believe what they're saying because it's the truth they have repeated to themselves over and over again until they started believing it, but it's actually false. And then you need to chime in and tell them that's not the reality. The facts tell a different story. Reality is what it is, and justice can be unfair from time to time. So that's very important. Yes, I fully agree. I can just say something else. You, as professionals, have a responsibility towards your clients, which means sometimes you have to tell them things that they won't like, that they won't want to hear. When a client comes to you saying, for example, I don't want to file my tax return this year, right, that's an offense, that can't be done, that's breaking the law. You have to tell them. There needs to be a relationship of professional trust. If that's not there, it can't work. I have a case that I want to discuss with you now, a doping case. A goalkeeper in a country from in Eastern Europe, and the day before the court case, he was having dinner with his wife, and he told her what I stated publicly wasn't true. My agent told me I should say that. Because I declared on the witness stand that I'd taken those drugs because I wanted to shed some weight, but that's not true. And I repeated the lie to myself over and over again because I wanted to start believing it. Anyway, he was found out, he was sussed out. Because when the wife of this goalie was called as a witness, She was asked some questions. She began to cry. Why am I telling you this? Because if a lie is told, people are going to find out one way or another if they dig, and they will dig deep enough. They always do. So that means that you as a lawyer, before a court case, you need to do all the necessary prep work to elicit as much information out of them as needed. Okay, we've got about 20 minutes left, plus 5 questions. I'm going to move on to some juicier topics. Now, you're no longer very young. You are experienced lawyers. Do you think of yourselves as lawyers, as salespeople, as managers, as client catchers, so to speak? Well, I do all of that that you just listed out. Some things I'm better at, some things I'm slightly worse at. PR, for example, I'm not particularly good at. I envy you. In fact, I'm jealous because you always seem very confident, very cavalier when you appear in public. I'm not very good at that. I'm just not very good at that. We need to have a full set of skills, of course, as diverse a set of skills as possible, but it's only normal that you're better at some things than others. So right now, am I correct to understand from what you said that you'd like to be better at PR? Yeah, I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind that. Because you know, sometimes I get a little embarrassed when I appear in public. I wish that didn't happen. And look at Juan sporting a bow tie in public. Look at the confidence he's got and that you don't have. Lucas, what about you? Yeah, I think it depends, really, because things change over time. When you start out, you pick up new skills, you have to face new challenges, you learn new ways of coping with those, and you realize early on that being a lawyer is not only about studying the law, studying regulations. It's not only about drafting contracts. No, we do so much more. We do a lot of human resource management, debt recovery, admin work. And aside from all of that, there's the law. I feel now, in this day and age, I feel like a one-man orchestra, sort of tapping my foot to a tempo as I juggle several different musical instruments. That's how it feels nowadays. Back in the day, I remember when I was younger, I had a lot more time to draft a contract or a lawsuit. I used to love it. But now I have so much more tasks and things that I'm in charge of that I have far less time to do that. Yeah, so I have to try and find new clients and keep old clients and get paid, make sure the office is running smoothly, and that's something you learn how to do along the way. And it's not the same for everyone. Some people are just very, very highly specialized in one thing. They're not very good at anything really, except for that one thing that they're great at, and that works for them. Right, for me, things have been changing as well. I've much evolved over time. The other day, someone told me that the most important thing of all really is issuing invoices isn't getting paid. Just the other day, I don't take that too seriously, of course, but I do agree with what my colleague said. Priorities shift over time. And the thing I most regret today is that I don't have time to do all the things I need to do. You know, I get up in the morning, I have breakfast, and then I have to rush to work. It's a constant rundown all the time, and I regret. Well, I regret. It's difficult. It's difficult to strike a balance between all the things that you have to do in your life. It's difficult to be a lawyer, but it is true that there exist a variety of profiles. Some people are, I don't know, just very, very good at points of law, but not as good at PR or something like that. And other people are maybe jacks of all trades, and they're not overly good at anything in particular, but they're good at a number of different things. Some people are particularly good at management, perhaps because they don't like studying the law all that much. Yeah, the most important thing is just striking a balance between all those things. It's only normal that some people should prefer to appear in public than others. Some people are nicer than others. That's normal. That's life. It happens to everyone. The most important thing really is that you're good at working as part of a team. Some people are not great at that. They have too much ego for it. Being able to delegate is just as important. A team of lawyers is much like a football or a basketball team. You've got your pivot, you've got your forward, you've got your striker, you've got your goalie, you've got your midfielders. True, as a lawyer, I think you need to be very, very good at one thing, but also you need to be adaptable. You need to be able to play in more than one position. You can't be the best of the best in all positions on the pitch, but you need to be good at more than one thing. You need to be able to delegate. If somebody's better than you at one particular aspect of the job, then delegate tasks to that person. Some people are better at certain things than others, and it's something that very often you can sense straight away when you talk to them, etc. In certain things, certain skills, you'd be a 7 or an 8 as opposed to a 10, but it's fine. That's just how it works. There's this anecdote that I like to tell about not having enough time in not there being enough hours in a day. Imagine you go to the office and you see a file on your desk marked as urgent. So you work on it, then you go to lunch, you come back, your secretary gives you a letter and says, this is very urgent. Okay, so you start working on that, but after 2 minutes, another secretary comes in, tells you, but this is very, very urgent. And after you've worked on the very, very urgent file, the file that was very urgent is half done magically. The file that was just urgent that you were handed in the morning, that's solved. Sometimes time sorts itself out, basically. What is it, next question, what is it you like most and least about sports law in your day-to-day lives? Javier, you take this first. What I like most and least? Yeah, in your day-to-day life. Okay. I think what I like most is what I said at the beginning. It is an international field, sports law. And also, I love that you get to learn a lot in it. It's very varied, very diverse, this industry. You have to be able to offer multiple types of services to the industry. And I love that. Sports law in and of itself is not that I don't like it. I do like it. But what I'm even more passionate about is my day-to-day life, the diversity of it all. we were talking about earlier about immediate gratification syndrome that our clients all seem to have nowadays, and sometimes you need to be, good and just say very clearly that you need to take a step back because you need a little more time to handle their case before it can bear fruit. And that's something that makes me a little bit jittery, the fact that we have so much pressure, but that's all.
What I like most from this, since I was a kid, I loved to travel, to people, to move around. As of today, I have friends all over the world. When I got married, we have these people from all different nationalities. And you also travel and you have someone to see, to talk to call. And that's something that is really enriching and that I really like from this work that we do. What I like the least is that there's no longer summertime. That summertime for us is a time of a lot of work when everyone is resting, when everyone is on holidays. Especially when I was younger, when I started, that would give you some freedom because you would go out of everyone's path when everyone was on vacation, holidays, and that's it. But when you have children, you have the holidays that you have, and that's on the phone. Everyone's relaxed on the beach, and you the computer, and you learn to live on holidays with your brother-in-law and things like that. So we all have to adapt to that, and it's something that is difficult, and that you're not going to have that. It's not something that changes over time. So that's it. I believe the best it would be to be a part of a solution. That I did this to solve things, and sometimes you're part of a solution. And the other one is a bit, yes, the negative part. Saturdays, Sundays, as Luca was saying, holidays, and when you have families, it's a lot more complicated. People to see that you get up from dinners, lunch, midnight, you're walking on the street talking, and people think, okay, what are you doing? That's what it was in the sense of conjugating this, conciliation is a lot more complex. What I like most is hearings, because I enjoy that a lot. I really love that. And the worst is, as you were saying, that one day they call you to go to hearing on August 17th, and then you have to go to talk to the customers, and the 20th of August is the birthday of my wife. So you manage summer well for a long time. You are there on a beautiful island, and people move to see you. So you're a wonderful example of how to set an example. Yeah, now with Zoom, it's a lot better. Everywhere in the world that you are, you get there, and that's wonderful. But sometimes you have to go there, see that, and it's complicated. I try to do it less and less because I try to all the lawyers in the law firm to have them on the place, and they will do that, and then I can get some rest. Okay, last question before your questions. Future, not just about football, but sports in general. What are the key points that you see that further to artificial intelligence that we talked about that are going to be key, or the crisis or positive development of sports and sports law? What are you thinking about that, or maybe nothing, and the world will continue as is? From my point of view, transformation of a sport, have always been, but we now in entertainment and content, I believe that's what's going to have affect many of the things that are going to happen in the future in organization, and how that's consumed, how sports is consumed. I think it's going to be key. I think we're in a moment of evolution, in a turning point, I would say, of the legal sports system. I would focus on that. We're in a moment where there are a number of situations that are happening. It seems that there's going to be a change according to what we understand of what happened until now in the legal sports system. This affects FIFA, task structure, the Olympic structure, even at the different levels. I believe it's more and more important to European regulation on the framework that has global importance now. Talking about that this goes together with the transformation of the sports as a whole that I believe we're seeing, and it's going more towards entertainment, what Marcos Moda called sportainment, and I repeats a lot, but it did has part of a vision, I believe, of where this is going and how this part is going. I believe there are going to be changes, and these changes are going to be important and are going to affect a lot of the next few years, and of course us. I believe that the first comes from the second. Yeah, I think it gets feedback from itself. I believe we're in a moment where the things are going to happen. Yes, and piling up on what was mentioned, there was an area for doing that, which is bigger because they're now about content generation in the industry on exploiting assets that's going to change, so going to make somehow these about competitions and how that's going to happen. I think that's incredible, even from the technical point of view, to learn about it. Because I was seeing something about all this of the infinite stadium with virtual reality goggles, where I was amazed with the options, even of watching a football match with the amazing clarity, and with the goggles you're on one of the boxes, and your side is a kid who's in a different city, but with the Google is interacting with you, and you're saying, okay, I have the box behind, not the locker room, behind the bench, or you press a button, and I tested that, and you get in the goal, and you're watching the corner as if you were the goalkeeper. So that's something. I believe that we're in a moment, and this is also going to require analysis on the technical part, and this is going to be really incredible. So I believe even the pitch for you, or the field for you, is even larger. Remember a few years ago, when they make him see where this was going to, and he was on the NBA, and he said, okay, so what are we selling, seats or goggles? Am I selling the Monday for Tuesday and Thursday? Millions of guys who can have a chair at home and do that. So tell me what the business is, because I need to understand this, because I'm spending lots of money for people to get here and fill out the stadium. If I have to spend that in goggles, then I need to know that. So tell me, where are we going? What's the future of the franchise? So the conclusions here is that it's entertainment, more and more technology, cutting-edge technology, new laws, and the new sports legal system. And what I have here is more work for you guys. So now we're going to have the last 5 minutes for 3 questions, just 3 questions for you guys. If it's just one, even better. First, thank you all for your amazing session and sharing this time with us. I believe the question would be regarding people who would like to start a project, like a legal consultant on this area in the origin countries of each of us, or if we find one in Spain. But what would it be the main idea you thought when you set up your practice, and what were the main pillars to build everything you achieved until now? Well, each of us are going to tell you a different story. Yeah, these are all different. Quickly, my story is that you go initially to a law not connected to sports, you get trained in that as you have a trend and you like it, and you find a way finding someone who has the same vision, and you set up a practice with people you think are qualified and with whom you can go and do that. That would be really quickly what I did. Also, if you ask the first day, did I know that I was going to reach that point? No, life takes you from different places. I knew I liked it, and it makes sense that you would do that, but it was more on the and you join 4 or 5 people, and then that happens. So God has mysterious ways. Yeah, what I would say is that to start a law practice is something that requires time. It should not be an imminent goal to start that, because what you need to do is train yourself, know people, find different, find your place. And from that, and it's not bad to have that as a goal or as a final destination, but I would say that you need to do it little by little, but looking for customers, managing a practice, as was mentioned. You have to add many things. So have training as a lawyer is key, have some experience is key, and then grow up, train, find people along the journey that will become your partners or not. I don't know. In my specific case, I had a previous journey of a lot of work, of being in practice, of being an entity as such, and a specialized multidisciplinary law firm when you meet a lot of people and you get trained there. I understand how that works, and then you get your project, and life takes you through paths that you were not expected, and you find your place. In this case, I started the Statim project with 2 partners that are also friends, colleagues with whom I've worked for a long time, and we understand each other well, and we have a shared vision of what we wanted. And I believe that's really important. When we started talking about it, we found out that we had quite a similar idea of what we wanted to get, and that is what generated a project, which is a young project that is the start, and we'll see how it goes. Javier will tell you a success story that starts and how he already reached that point. I believe in our case is the same as everybody else's. At the end of the day, at least for me, the question I always ask myself is, what do I want? What do I want to do? What kind of services do I want to provide? And with whom? So, for instance, initially, I knew that we wanted to do something a bit more, not just legal. And I set it up with Julio Serra, and Julio is not a lawyer, he's an economist. And he doesn't even like law at all. So he has zero interest in the law. But it's because an important thing is what type of services do I want to provide? And, to be clear about it, and with whom I doing that. And then it's something about, as I was mentioned here, to work, to be trained, and to have also that point that you need to go through the darkest night, and you have to do some commercial job, and it's all like that. But I'm convinced that if you really clear about it and you work about it, things end up by happening. That's my... I think you need to be in the picture. And being in the picture means, in Argentina, that people don't forget about you or that they know about you. So you start, and of course, what do I do now? Do I go back to my country? Do I set up a practice? How do people know me? By writing an article on a sports press or not a sports press about the specific facts that are happening. What happens in my country? What happens on the UEFA or FIFA or whatever? So you write. And that brought me tons of customers to write, to prepare probably a lot, to be ready. You study a master here and you end up being ready. And then door to door, to be in the picture, door to door, the Olympic Committee of my country, the Federation of Taekwondo, on the football, or the third level karate practice, whatever. I don't know, a lot of that. And sometimes you say, okay, I'm here, so I'll be a referee on the fencing competition. It's not going to give you money, but then you can do that, and you know people, and of course, then to go to the right places. The right places means that you have to spend money, you have to invest, you have to go to assemblies, you have to go to seminars, you have to go to the Congress, and you will do a lot of networking. And of course, everyone around here with that you already know, to know that you're going to be able to talk to Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, India, And then you have, if there's a case, if there's a player, you have a contact on location. So to be always in the picture, and that's it. So thank you all for being here, and thank you all for listening to us. We are grandpas. Well, some of us are grandpas and younger people who tell you about their stories. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.